Welcome to HIListically Speaking. I'm Hilary Russo, certified holistic health coach and health and wellness journalist. This is an empowering place to explore self-awareness, self-love, and transformation through health, healing, and humor. By sharing life-changing experiences, knowledge, and guests with varied expertise, we'll explore who we are, how we got that way, and what it takes to be a happy and healthy grown-up. Mind, body, and spirit. I'm glad you're here. I have a guilty confession. I love organization. I get giddy when I find containers that fit perfectly in a space. I am such my mother's daughter. I used to pretend I lived in the demo rooms in IKEA, and I longed for the dorm room designed by the Container Store. But somehow, my dorm room and my home never looked quite like the models. Because let's face it, the space I'm in is actually lived in. Imagine that. And with that space comes memories and stuff and sometimes clutter. Look, I've never been a messy person, but I've got stuff. Years of stuff. School stuff, family stuff, work stuff, life stuff, and it can get out of hand if I'm not too careful. Are you with me? So when I stumbled upon Decluttering Expert Dana K. White's blog, A Slob Comes Clean, I had to know two things. First, why she calls herself that, and second, what was her superpower to clean up the mess? On this episode of HIListically Speaking, Dana gets deep into the dirt on how to declutter at the speed of life and manage your home without losing your mind. Okay, well, Dana, I made sure that my area was very clean around me before before I pressed record today, because I don't know. I'm talking to a decluttering expert, and I don't know. We live in this age where everything is Zoom and online, virtually and visually. And even though HIListically Speaking isn't per se a visual podcast, you can see me. And how am I doing?
You're doing great. I mean, I'm strategically placed as well, just so you know. I mean, Zoom scaping is a thing. Okay.
It is. There's even a website called Room Rater where they judge people based on the backgrounds. And as a journalist, I get that a lot because I do a lot of on-camera work. And so the podcast is kind of my way of just being able to be in my natural state and not have to be all dressed up. So when I was like, okay, I'm talking to Dana, I got to clean this stuff up.
It's so funny to me because, the name of my site is A Slob Comes Clean, which is basically my story. And it's always funny to me how some people are like, oh, so you must have everything perfect. And then other people are like, oh, well, I can show you anything because you're, so it's interesting to me, the reactions that people have to this decluttering expert idea,
Sure. Yeah. And finding you was really fascinating to me. I actually bought both of your books to share with a couple friends who are not the neatest of folks. So I was looking for ways in my own right to help them on their journey to decluttering and cleaning. And honestly, myself, you don't necessarily have to be messy or a slob or hoarder to find value in what you're sharing with your website, your blog, A Slob Comes Clean, and also the two books that you have, The Decluttering at the Speed of Life, which I love, and How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind, which most of us do when we just have to even put away laundry.
Exactly.
So how did Dana come about? How did the slob come clean?
So in the beginning, I did not go by my real name. I was Noni, which is short for anonymous. I made that up because basically I had been messy my entire life. I was the messy child. I was messy in school. I had the locker that if I opened it up, everything would just come crashing down. And I didn't like being messy, but I didn't worry too much about it because I thought, oh, well, that's just not my focus right now. I was like, oh, okay, well, someday in my life, I'll have it all together because, I'm usually able to figure things out. And then I became a stay-at-home mom when my now 19-year-old son was born. And, and I thought, I had always assumed that every time I thought I was going to, okay, well, once I have my own apartment, then I'll care enough to keep it perfect. And it never worked. It just was, I was just constantly messy. But it never occurred to me that being a stay-at-home mom was not going to cure my messiness problems. Like I just assumed that. And it didn't. In fact, it got way worse. And so at that point was when I went, okay, it is not my circumstances. It is not my, you know, it's not for not caring. Like there is literally something wrong with me. I mean, that was what I confirmed basically through that, that time. And so I would work really hard on my house. But then I also wanted, like, I was always looking for a creative outlet. I was a theater arts teacher before I had kids. And I just was always looking for that. And I'd always thought writing would be something I would want to do, but I didn't know how to go about doing it. So in 2008, which has been a really long time ago now, can you believe how long
it's hard to believe?
Right?
Like I keep forgetting that we're in a new year. I'm still, for those still writing checks, you write the check date forever for the longest time before you move on.
And sometimes I'll go back several years when I write the date. I'm like, wait, what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
So I discovered what blogs were. They were still fairly new back then, and realized, oh, this is something that people are doing. They're writing, other people are reading it. They're turning it into a business, which means they're getting paid to be a writer. And I was like, okay, I want to do this. Like, this will be a great thing to do. And I didn't start for a year and a half because my house was such a disaster. And I know myself. I know I throw myself into creative projects. And I thought, well, that's one more thing to keep my focus from my home. And so I didn't start. And it was frustrating because then I felt like I had this creative outlet that was such a great motivation. Like this should have been my motivation. All those other years, all those other times that I thought something was going to motivate me to have my house under control, had never worked. But I thought, well, this, let me get my house under control and then I can start doing this thing. And it just didn't work. And finally started my, A Slob Comes Clean anonymously as an excuse to be able to write, thinking that it was just going to be a place for me to kind of learn about what it was going on in the blogging world, while just doing this practice blog while I got my house under control. And that's why I had the, fake name and everything. Didn't tell anybody, didn't even tell my husband what I was doing. And it turned out here we are in 2021. And who knew?
Yeah. Well, we never know, right? But was the anonymous part because you were a little nervous to come clean about being the slob?
This was literally my deep, dark secret. I mean, like literally the thing that I feared people finding out about me. I mean, because I could get my house clean for someone to come over. And I knew what it took to get it clean for someone to come over. I didn't know what it took to keep it under control on a daily basis. So like I would invite someone over, but I would give myself 2 weeks and I would, declutter for the first week, which meant I was throwing everything in the master bedrooms because I could lock that door, and then I would spend the second week cleaning. And then I would look around while people were over and I would think, this is what I want my house to look like. And then 3 days later, it was back to worse than it was before I ever started cleaning. And I didn't know what happened in those 3 days. That was my problem. Like, I didn't know how other people kept their houses from being a total disaster. And so that's what I was doing when I was writing, was just I was recording what I was doing, things I was trying, why I was resisting, like what it was that I wasn't doing and figuring that out. And through that, I discovered there are a lot of women who struggle with this. I mean, there's men too, but it is right or wrong. I think it's wrong, but it's an identity issue for women. I mean, it is like, we're supposed to be born knowing how to do this. A man is like, oh, well, he's a man, but a woman feels like, wait, is there something really wrong with me? Because every other woman I know appears to not struggle with this at all. But it's because we can hide behind our doors. I mean, we don't have to let people in when it's messy.
And it's also a woman thing because we are by nature the nurturers of the home. We are the ones that take care of the home, the nesters, not meaning that we stay at home. Well, right now everyone's staying at home, but I get that. I mean, we are by nature the ones that are responsible for that. The wonderful thing is having a partner that equally feels that necessary to be tidy and clean. But that's just our motherly nature. Well,
and, my husband has always been supportive. I mean, that's the reason I'm able to do what I do is he just thinks it's all great. But, he was 32 when we got married. So he had lived alone. And his house wasn't great, but he did the basics and kept them under control. And we've talked about it a lot since then, of he didn't know what to do to help me because I had no routines. Like nothing was consistent. He was more than happy to do dishes and do laundry and do anything, but it always went straight back to being a disaster because there wasn't any kind of routine. So once I started working on myself, which it was very helpful that I didn't tell him, because then I was only focused on what I was doing and what I wasn't doing. And as I figured out these are routines that actually work for me, then he was able to jump in on those and help out with those. But because, not everybody has a supportive partner. But I guess my example is even when you do have a supportive partner, it's still hard. I mean,
and obviously it's wonderful to have partnership with someone that is in alignment with you, even if they don't clean the same way you do or they're tidy the same way you do. Having that support system is so crucial because, it is a partnership. But you battling your own demons with being messy, being a slob, which is a strong word to call yourself, by the way. I mean, you owned it.
Well, I didn't own it at first.
That's part
you
of the
didn't.
Reason why. Yeah.
No, I mean, the title came to me and it's pretty catchy, and that was back when every blog had a cute name, you didn't just do your own name or anything. But I didn't want to call myself that. Like I literally was trying to think of other words to use and I couldn't, and here I am wanting to be a writer and I couldn't think of any other words, but I was so desperate to get started because I was like, this is it. This is going to be the thing that's really going to help me. But calling myself a slob ultimately was helpful because once I had called myself that, I mean, it was anonymous, but once I had called myself that, there was no point in pretending it wasn't that bad. I mean, like it forced me into being blunt and honest and not trying to pretend anymore. And it also ultimately helped me identify that this is part of who I am. Like I don't like being a slob, but I am one because of how my brain works, which is great because it's very much related to the creative side of my brain. Like the fact that I am a creative person, I see things differently than the world does. I love that, but that's directly related to this messiness part. And I only figured that out by meeting other people, who were reading what I was writing and saying, that's how I think too. And I was like, oh, well, you're a really cool person. I was like, oh, because before it was kind of like, well, what is wrong with me? Am I just a horrible person? And I'm like, no, I love all these people. They're great and they're creative and lots of theater teachers, and
theater people love props. So there you go. Now you have more stuff.
I could literally justify keeping anything because you could use it one day.
I know, I get it. That's my background too. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like we become the MacGyver. Like everything we have could possibly be something else. But then there are those people who aren't in the theater arts and understand what it's like to be able to repurpose, which is a popular word now, props and items. Then we're just actually holding on to stuff that doesn't have value to us. Like one person's trash is another person's treasure kind of theory, right? So where do you draw the line of, I don't find the value in having this in my home. Perhaps somebody else can.
Well, so my decluttering process is based on acknowledging the fact that I do feel attachment to all of that stuff and that I can come up with a reason. Like I'm not going to say, stop being that way, Dana, because that's who I am. I mean, I am the person who does that. But so what I had to do was come up with ways to declutter that didn't let me go down that road. So all of my decluttering questions, my steps are all very fact-based. So like instead of making a value judgment on, does this item have value? Well, of course it does, because I could do something with it, but instead of doing that, I have to ask myself questions that let me know, would I ever remember I had this? Where would I look for it first? I'm going to go take it there right now so that it has an actual home. And then when I can't answer those questions, then I have to be completely realistic with myself and pretty blunt with myself. about that. Does that answer what you were
Yeah,
asking?
that's actually a tip. I have some questions that came in that I was going to ask you, but you just answered one because when I help some of my clients, and some are dealing with messiness and hoarding, how do you allow that person to truly identify, it's not that this is trash, but is it previously loved and could create value to somebody else? What is your reason for holding on to it? There are certain questions, obviously, we need to ask ourselves, because then and sometimes it's not even just stuff. Like it could be, oh, wait, I'm a size 8 last year and I'm going to get back into those jeans. So I'm going to hold on to them just in case, because that's my goal. But then you've got 10 pairs of jeans you're holding on to of different sizes because you're identifying yourself as the old self or the self you want to be. Well, how about treating yourself to a new pair of jeans in the new size you are, rather than holding on to all the old stuff, right?
Right. And ultimately, because I can go down that road, and because I was the person who could justify keeping every single thing. So I have what I call the container concept, which was life-changing for me. And it's one of those things that if somebody would have told me, I would have been like, okay, surely I already knew that, surely I did. And I hear that from people all the time, but I hear from so many people, this is the concept that changed everything for me. I needed someone to explain it. They also can't believe that they didn't know. And what it basically comes down to is I thought containers were for putting things in. Because that's what organized people love to do, right? I didn't know they were limits. Like the purpose of a container is to contain. It is meant to serve as a limit. And what that does is it frees me from all of those value decisions, because what I can do is, like, let's say those 10 pairs of jeans. Like if you look at each pair of jeans individually, you can come up with a reason why that pair of jeans should stay in your closet. But when I realized containers were meant to serve as limits, I also realized, well, okay, everything in my house is a container. Every shelf, every drawer, every closet, everything is a container. So the drawer that I have for jeans determines how many pairs of jeans I can keep. Because if I have more than will fit in there, then things are out of control. So just like firemen work to contain a fire, and if it gets outside of the boundaries, then bad things happen. It's the same way with clutter. It turns into clutter when it's outside those boundaries. So because of that, then I don't have to ask myself, does this pair have value? Does this pair have value? I can say, okay, which are my favorite? And I'm going to put those in the drawer first. And every time, I get to keep picking my favorites. And by the time the drawer is full, I'm able to go, oh, that's the limit. It's not me saying these jeans don't have value. I don't have to say that. I don't have to assess them and reject them. It's literally the physical space making that decision for me. And it takes that it takes that weight off of me of making all these decisions. And then I'm able, and it's been fun. Like it's fun to pick out your favorite jeans, right? But then if you find your favorite pair of jeans because they were actually in the dirty clothes or you were wearing them and you didn't think about it, then all you have to do, right.
You're pushing things down, right?
What I used to think I had to do was either push things down or,
get another container. I was just going to say, is that the next step?
No, it's not. Instead, it's me saying, okay, I know for sure I love these jeans because I was wearing them while I was doing this or whatever. All I have to do is say, what in this space do I not love as much as these jeans? I'm not saying it's bad. And that reveals itself, because when you know that you love these and you look at it and you say, there's not enough space in here for that, then it usually is like, oh, well, actually that pair right there, they always like fall down, and then I'm always hiking them up or whatever. Or those look funny with my favorite boots or whatever. And it just reveals itself as something that I can remove to make space for that.
I love that concept so much. And look, I'm a girl that loves going to the container store, and I love little office supply things that hold stuff. I mean, I'm very neat, but you can't live amongst a million containers. Or I love IKEA. Everything looks so neat and organized, but that's not, you don't look like a demo room. Your home is not a demo model, right? We have to live.
Exactly. That was my thing, is I was so overwhelmed, had way too much stuff. And so I would look at someone whose house was under control and I would think the containers are the answer. And so I would go buy a bunch of containers And then it never worked correctly in my house. And then the containers turned into clutter, you know?
Right.
But there's also your clutter threshold too. Like, cause you know, my mother was the greatest at coming and basically being my professional organizer. I mean, that's just what she would do. I mean, she would come in and she would get my house under control. She'd put everything in away neatly, and I could not maintain it. And so what I realized as I was trying to work on my own house was, as I got stuff out of my house, I suddenly hit this point where I realized I'm able to keep my house under control now. And the reality was, I had always thought I needed to get organized, and really I just needed to declutter, because the clutter threshold is what I call the point at which you personally have more stuff than you can keep under control easily. So it doesn't matter what someone else has in their home, what their house looks like. It's literally, if my house is constantly out of control, it's because I have too much stuff. And the only way to figure out what my point is at which I can keep it under control is get rid of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's interesting about that, and I love that you bring that up, because I'm sitting in front of a desk right now that's a heck of a mess because I'm trying to organize everything. And I am organized, but then it overwhelms me sometimes, you know, and I'm rather neat. But even when we think about other people in their homes, one thing we're probably not thinking of is there are some people that probably clean before you come, and you're looking at them thinking they're clean. And then you open one of their closets and it's like Jenga, right? Everything comes falling out. We don't know.
Right. Well, and when I think about Jenga, I think about, like, you know, so like my mother has a super high clutter threshold, which means she can pack a cabinet like Jenga. And when she needs something, she gets it out without everything falling out.
So funny. She
puts it back exactly where she knows where things are. She can keep it under control. I don't have a personality that lets me, like, if I have it packed like Jenga, I'm going to be like, what do I need? And I'm going to grab it. Everything's going to fall, and I'm going to go on. And then it's just going to be this disaster that stays there forever. You know, like, it was me accepting that, okay, it's not about how much stuff I wish I could have. It's about how much stuff can I handle.
And it's different for everyone. It's
totally different.
I get it. For everyone. My mom's the same way. She has like an Etsy store. You go into her office and everything is in perfect spot, and she knows exactly where to go to get that one little thing that's like the size of a fingernail. I'm like, I would be searching everywhere for it, and then it would be a disaster room with me having to find that thing. So the idea of the threshold is brilliant. I love that. How has that helped you going forward since?
Well, I know, because I have hit my clutter threshold. I know that when I start to feel that, oh my goodness, what is wrong in my house? Like, it's getting, because, you know, a big part of my realization was realizing this is a lifelong struggle for me. There's no cure. It's really just me figuring out how to function in my home in a way that works for my brain, because I want my house under control. Okay. But it's not like I am aiming to be the person who has a high clutter threshold. Instead, it's me accepting that I have a low clutter threshold. So when my house starts to get out of control, I'm now able to realize, oh, it's because we've had stuff coming in and we haven't been taking stuff out. And that means I have more stuff in my house than I can handle, and I need to declutter some more.
Yeah. Yeah. The first step in anything, whether it's a big problem or a small problem, is awareness. You know, if we don't know that we have a problem, you can't get anything under control until you find that first step of realizing that there might be a problem. And like you did early on with being an anonymous writer, you weren't accepting of that. You were just kind of, there's something up and I'm not willing to open up about it. So to those who are listening that might have some struggles with decluttering their homes, what would be maybe a couple tips that you would share to get them on the road?
Well, the first thing I would say is to acknowledge that there is a difference between organizing and decluttering. They are not the same thing. And most likely, if you're overwhelmed in your home, you need to forget about getting organized right now. Like, I know that's the goal, but it's not the solution. So the solution is to declutter. So go ahead and start decluttering, because when I realized organizing and decluttering weren't the same thing, it gave me permission to just declutter. to like just do that. And when I was just decluttering, I didn't have to sit down and come up with a plan. I didn't have to go shopping for containers before I got started. All I needed to do was start getting stuff out of my house. And you can do that literally now. Like as you're listening to this, my number one piece of advice is to grab a black trash bag. If you have a black trash bag, if you don't, get whatever you have. But if you have a black one, it's nice because then the people in your house can't see what you're putting inside of it. And start throwing away actual trash. If you have a recycling routine, bring that along with you. And just anything that is trash, put it in the trash bag or the recycling. Okay. And get rid of it, because what that will do is it gets you started. There is nothing emotional about trash. When I mean trash, I mean like actual, I'm sitting here looking at, this is the room, my son who just left for college again. This is the room he like hangs out in a lot while he's home. And I'm like looking behind the TV over here, and there is some plastic wrapping, I'm assuming from a video game he got at Christmas. I don't know. But it's like, I didn't even think about it. And when you look at like, let's say it's that cabinet that you've packed full, like you've just shoved things in there and slammed the door and hoped nobody would open it. When you look at an overall mess, it's very overwhelming. But when you can tell yourself, I'm just going to look for trash, even though I'm pretty sure there's no trash there, even if you're just convinced that there's no trash, just tell yourself, I'm going to look for trash. It makes you start to see individual items instead of the overall volume of the mess. And with every item that you remove, the overall volume decreases just a little bit, which then decreases your feeling of being overwhelmed, which then allows you to keep going. And you're starting to really assess the situation because you're not looking at it as just a mess, but instead it's individual items.
That's a great tip. I recall when I've helped people declutter or get rid of, the idea of the black bag is better because if they can see through the bag walking by it and they haven't thrown it out immediately that day, the hand does go back in there and find value sometimes. I've noticed that, and I'm like, But Dana, there's a really fine line too, because as we know, there is a difference between being a hoarder, which is it is a clinical issue, and just being someone that's messy. So getting rid of other people's stuff, or even taking ownership of deciding to remove something from your home that you are giving value sometimes does take additional support, So, how, and I know you're not a hoarding expert by any means, but what would your suggestion be to those folks who, have the 300 Whole Foods bags inside of a bag? Because now it's not just about clothes, but it's like, are you really going to ever get to all those?
Well, again, it's to start with the easy stuff. So my beginning of my decluttering process, it's 5 steps. The first steps are easy stuff first, meaning the non-emotional stuff. Because the problem is even those bags can be very emotional to the person who had great intentions when they were collecting them. Don't start with the stuff that your brain immediately goes to when you think I've got to declutter. Instead, start with the stuff that you're like, oh, well, I've been meaning to do that anyway. Like, oh, well, that was stuff I've been meaning to get rid of. Why is that there? I don't know. Start with the easy stuff, because what happens is, and what happened for me, and what happens again and again and again with people that, I help, is it's hard to understand what it is that you're going to experience in the future. The benefits of this. So like I didn't value open space because I really hadn't experienced a lot of open space because my house was just full of junk. And as I got rid of stuff, even just the easy stuff, my brain started to adjust to seeing open space and going, okay, actually, I really like how that looks. Also, as I got rid of more stuff, I didn't trip as often. I didn't run into things as often. It was easier to find stuff. Like all of those things that used to be my reason, like when I would experience those frustrations, I was like, oh, I've got to get organized. Instead, just by getting stuff out of my house and really focusing on decluttering, not organizing, just getting stuff out, I experienced all those benefits. I could find things. I, would walk into a room and it was easy to rearrange, like when you spill something, like if you spill something and you've got a bunch of junk in that space, it's a huge dramatic deal. But if you have been working on decluttering and then you spill something and all you have to do is wipe up the floor, it's like, oh, and it starts to really change what you value. And I started to value open space over my stuff, and it really changed as I was going. So don't start with those things that make you nervous first. Start with the stuff that you've been meaning to do anyway, that you meant to get rid of, that is easy, it's not emotional, and it will build over time.
Oh, that's great.
Give you decluttering momentum and confidence.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And what a great takeaway. So I have a question that one of our listeners asked prior, and they asked, do you have a favorite decluttering and organizing expert that you admire? There's so many out there now,
Okay. So this is going to be like a really awkward answer because so I have a personality where I don't like to be told what to do. Okay. And that's probably part of my problem.
Girl, I'm with you.
So I basically had tried all the methods, which not really, but I mean, this was back in 08, 09. So it was before a lot of the ones that you've heard of now, but I had tried different methods. I had talked to friends. I had tried to get all this advice. And ultimately, when it came down to it, I wasn't following a method. I was literally just trying to be consistent and declutter and focus on routines in my home. So no, unfortunately, I don't really.
I think that's fine. Yeah.
Because that's part of my personality is like figuring it out, which is the reason why I'm like, sometimes I'll have people who really want me to hold their hand. And I'm like, you're going to get so much farther if you just start throwing away trash. Like it's better to start throwing away trash than it is to read a book about decluttering. I mean, like you will learn more ultimately down the road by just doing it. So, I mean, there are a lot of great experts out there, I want to say, but like I haven't read Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up or anything like that. It's funny because I'll hear people will be like, what do you think of that book? And I'm like, I only know what you guys tell me because like, I think it really got popular as I was writing my first book. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to read it because I don't want to accidentally, but I mean, the thing about it is whatever works for you is exactly what you need to be doing. But you also need to know that if you follow advice and then you fail, that's not because you're hopeless. You just have to find a way that does work for you, which is ultimately what I came down to is I was like, I had felt like a failure because everything I had tried all my life never worked. Well, it was not the advice that was the problem. It was me, and I needed to figure out something that did work for me and giving myself that permission to not feel like a failure because traditional organizing advice didn't work for me was actually huge in taking me forward and giving me permission to say, okay, then what does work for me?
That's powerful. Yeah. And that's interesting because it leads into the next question. This one is from a listener, Sally from Texas. Somebody else from Texas. Hi, Texas. Got 3 Texan girls right here, right? Well, by college for me, but you're a Texan girl yourself, right? So Sally says, I love your books. They've made a difference in my life, especially how to manage my home without losing my mind, which we all do, right? Thanks, Sally. And the question is, what guided you to actually take that step to write a book?
Okay. So I'd always wanted to be a writer. That was the beginning of how this all started, but I had and when I say no, I mean like no intention of writing about cleaning. Like that was, first of all, who wants to write about cleaning? Seriously. But I also was like, guys, this is like, I'm not perfect. Like, I think I had always, because most people who write about cleaning and organizing love cleaning and organizing. And so anything I had read, I was like, well, I don't relate to that. That's not me. I can't do that. Like, it just wasn't, and I thought that's what people wanted. It took me a couple of years, and it was actually a blogging friend that I had met at a conference who she got, we kind of paid attention to each other's blogs and stuff, but she got sick one day and she was just reading like my whole entire everything I'd ever written on my blog. And she was like, Dana, you have to write a guide. And I was like, no, I don't want to write a guide. I can't tell anybody how to have their house be perfect. She was like, no, you have to write a step-by-step guide. And so I had written a little ebook called 28 Days to Hope for Your Home, which is now actually included in How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. Where, I talk you through basically going from completely overwhelmed in your house, like what is wrong with me, to, oh, this is how this works. I think I can do this, in 28 days. And that made me realize, oh, okay, there's a lot of value in somebody sharing from the perspective of having truly struggled. And because I still feel like it's a struggle for me, it's not automatic, it's not natural for me. Sometimes I think, why would I be the one to share this? But when it, proved to help people, that made me then go, oh, okay, that's where I come in here. Like I wanted to be a writer, and this lets me be a writer. And, I'm here for the people who failed at everything else.
Well, and I imagine it's therapeutic for you too, to write it out, which is how you started it all with the blog.
It is. It definitely helps me get things in order. Because that's what writing is. It's basically putting all these thoughts into order, into where they make sense and they flow. And so just that process is very, helpful for me, especially in being able to explain it. It's very helpful when I get it written out.
As long as you don't have 100 copies of your book in your house. Yeah, okay. Answered that question.
What is the only reason I do is because I had just ordered for speaking events. Sure. I have, books, but I had just scheduled. I had just ordered a new batch because I was out. And I think I ordered more than I ever had before, which was, I think like 100 of each book, which is not cheap. Just so for the author, it's not cheap. And then, COVID hits. Yeah. And so there's no speaking events. And so it's
how, you know what, let's talk about that briefly, real quick. Now that we're in COVID, now that people are spending a lot of time at home, it can really create a little more stress. And I've had that with clients too, like being kind of confined to their homes. There's a lot of emotions and feelings that are arising, but then add clutter on top of that. It's like a whole nother person. What would be your suggestion to folks, especially in this time where you're really kind of confined to your home mostly?
Well, I think the most valuable thing would be to follow the process that allows you to, which is my process, which allows you to declutter without making a bigger mess. Like that is key, because the problem is a lot of times, most decluttering methods involve you pulling everything out of a space as the first step. Because I thought that was how you had to declutter, that's how I used to do it. And when I would pull everything out of a space, then I would get distracted, because I'm a really distractible person anyway. And I had little kids and all that. But, and so if I stepped away at some point during the project, then my house was worse off than it was before. Because what used to be shoved in a cabinet was now out all over the floor or all over a table. So I created my process to work so that if I have 5 minutes to work, I can make real actual progress. Use that 5 minutes to throw away trash. And then, one of my best pieces of advice is to take a picture, set a timer for 5 minutes, throw away trash, work on the easy stuff, which is stuff that has an established home somewhere else in your house, and you go ahead and take it there. And then take another picture after 5 minutes, and you'll see the difference that you can actually make in 5 minutes, so that when you have those awkward pauses throughout your day, let's say you're working from home or whatever, and you're like, okay, I have like 5 minutes. I can't really get anything real done in 5 minutes. That's a legitimate thing to think. But if you know that you actually can make real progress in 5 minutes, then it allows you to get started, and your house is ultimately going to be so much better off. And each of the steps in the process never leave you with a bigger mess. Like it is all about taking things, something comes out of a space and it goes to its final home, whether that's the trash bag, the recycling bin, the donate box, or its actual home in your house. Like it goes there immediately, instead of using a keep box, which is really just a procrastination box that makes you feel bad that you never really finished. No piles that you're making of stuff to take places later, because then when life happens, as it does, and you step away, it's always better off. than it was before you started.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to use that process because you're right. That 5 minutes can either be, scouring, like going on social media. You can't get anything done in 5 minutes effectively work wise, maybe mostly. So why not use it to like get rid of some things that are around you that are not going to be useful to you? That's brilliant. I love that. I think
what you just said about I can't get anything done in 5 minutes. A big part of that is that mindset shift of better is good. Mm-hmm. Having less in this space than I did when I started means I have decluttered successfully, even if I'm not finished. Mm. I have decluttered because there's less in there than there was before. And it's all gone to its final resting home. So there's nothing left to do later. It really is better. And that mindset shift will really take you far in actually ultimately helping your home. Because I used to think, okay, well, if I had a whole day with nothing else to do and the kids were out of the house, then I could actually declutter. But that was only because I thought decluttering was this big, huge like project. And instead, if I will do it without making a bigger mess, then it can happen in little bits of time here and there.
Mm. And it is a mindset. I'm constantly sharing with clients, you need to clear the space. And when I mean clear the space, I'm like, if you're not making space in your mind for what you do want to attract, then you're just cluttering your mind. And it does go hand in hand because it is very emotional. Anxiety, stress, all of that builds up when you are surrounded by stuff. And then that stuff affects you up here in your head. And then it's just a cyclical yuckiness. So, it does work hand in hand. So thank you for sharing that. What's next for Dana?
Well, I am working on another book. I've got, when does this come out?
Where are we? What day is it? What year is it? I think it's like March 7,032.
Okay.
That's the day that we're in.
Yeah. I've got several, I've got so many different little things going on, but I have another book that I'm working on. I've put out a few YouTube videos lately. I did that a lot back in like 2012. I think I did one every week and then I haven't done any years. And I have a 17-year-old son who's determined that I'm going to do more YouTube videos. So can I just tell you that
you're a producer?
That when your producer is your own 17-year-old son who is completely unimpressed with you. I mean, like, there is no one less impressed with me than my own teenagers, and so, or who thinks I'm funny or whatever, so I'm like trying to be me and being funny. And I'm kind of like, and he's sitting there just kind of, okay.
Please just drop me off in front of the mall instead of walking me in.
I'm like, if you want me to do these YouTube videos, you need to laugh at my jokes, honey.
Yeah. I need your support.
I know. Anyway, no, it's actually been a really fun project to work on together. But yeah, so I've just got different, and I have a podcast.
Yes, you do. So. Like share, and the name of your podcast is Slob Comes Clean.
That's right. You can search it anywhere. So, that's been
I'm
fun.
definitely going to share that and to let our listeners know of HIListically Speaking. I mean, you'll be able to find anything about Dana in the podcast page. There'll be a link to her blog and to her website, which includes great tips, which I've actually found such value in, even though my initial reason for going to your site was to help others. But I've found some great value. So thank you. But we'll share all of that. You'll find that on the podcast page. But I do want to do a rapid fire with you real quick.
Okay, I'm scared of what's going to come out of my mouth.
I love doing this. It's like my little evil moment with my guests. But basically, I'll just throw out a word. You know this just from being in theater and stuff. Throw out a word and then just come back with the first word that comes to mind. Don't think about it too much. Just go with it and be in the moment. Okay, are you ready? Okay.
Yes. Sort of.
Theater.
Person.
Slob.
Dana.
Clutter.
Stuff.
Acceptance.
Self.
Organize.
No.
Container.
Contain.
Cleanliness.
Subjective.
Nice. You're good. And I love that you owned it and finally, publicly, first time on HIListically Speaking, called yourself a slob. Well, no, you did, but you owned it, girl. You owned it, and that's important.
What's funny about that is I started using my name when I started writing actual like books. When I put out my first ebook, because I was like, I've worked hard on this, and I want credit for it, and so
and credit for the change. And credit for the growth. I mean, yes, pat on the back and say, I've done this, and now you're serving others and helping others. So yay, you. Yeah.
It's fun.
Any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think there's so much value in slow progress. And ultimately, slow progress is where you're really going to learn lasting things that are going to help you personally change. You're going to learn about yourself. You're going to learn about your space. And so don't feel like a failure because you don't have time to set aside or because you did set time aside and it didn't go like you wanted it to. Just give yourself permission to make small amounts of progress at a time. And I think you're ultimately going to be a whole lot better off and a whole lot more happy with your space.
Great. Love it. Thank you so much for being a guest. It's been a great pleasure having you.
It's been fun. Thank you for having me on.
If you want to learn more about Dana, A Slob Comes Clean, or pick up a copy of either of her books, you can find that link on the podcast page. And if you have an inspiring story to share, or you want to learn more about how I can support you on your healing journey, connect with me on my website at hilaryrusso.com. You can also reach out to me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Hilary Russo. I'd love to hear from you. And if this podcast inspires you in any way, consider subscribing or leave a rating and review, because your thoughts, they do matter to me. HIListically Speaking is produced by Alan Seals with music by Lipbone Redding. Connection is everything, and aligning with you is why I'm here. So thanks for listening. And until next time, be kind to your mind, and don't forget to laugh.